Now, opposition leader Anthony Albanese, his former Labor colleagues appear to be cashing it in with big money bonuses as executives of those industry superfunds. As they take home more cash, the Labor Party is fighting to increase compulsory super contributions, which could have a major impact on your take-home pay or any wage increase. So, for more on this, we're now joined by the Daily Telegraph's John Rolfe, who has broken this story. John, good to see you, mate. How are you?
G'day, Rowan. I'm really well.
Listen, this story, Albo's mates, they're all sitting on these big boards. Tell us the worst of it. I shuddered reading your terrific article today.
Yeah, it's become something of a retirement home for those who used to sit around the cabinet table when Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard was in charge. So we're talking about Nicola Roxon, the former health minister, Greg Combet, the former climate change minister, and if you go even further back, Don Russell, who was there at the birth of superannuation as the principal advisor to Paul Keating back in the 90s. And they are raking it in as the chairs of these industry super funds, earning between $170,000 and more than $200,000 a year in part-time gigs. And what their boards are doing is they're overseeing massive pay increases, in some instances more than an average person's entire annual wage, in an era when the regular worker can't get a pay increase at all. And what we have in prospect is more increases, if Anthony Albanese gets his way, more increases in compulsory super, which a major review has just found will very much reduce the likelihood of anyone getting a substantial wage increase anytime soon, because there's only one pot of money. If you get more in super, you get less in wage increases.
Well, that's true. More super means less money on payday. And then, we see at the same time all these Labor mates, if you like, cashing in with these huge super money amounts. I mean, there's a real conflict here. But Labor are always quick to criticise Liberals for stacking various boards or sending their mates on various things. But this is extraordinary. What do they actually do in these super funds? We hear so-and-so, ex-former minister or whatever, now sits on the board of this super fund. I mean, they have reasonably good track records, but what do they actually do, John?
Well, you don't see corporate Australia really appointing too many former politicians as chairs. The only one I can think of is Peter Costello at 9/Fairfax. It's not common practice for cabinet ministers to go on to lead boardrooms in corporate Australia, but it's a totally different story in the world of industry super. But these aren't normal boards, Rowan. In industry super funds like Australian Super, which is the very largest, overseeing $172 billion of investments, half of that board was appointed by the unions. So you're talking about people who are national secretaries, either active or formally, of various parts of the union movement. Are these really the best people? Are these the best custodians that can be found to oversee those people's retirement nest eggs? I don't think that they are, but they get the jobs because the union decides. Now, the other half come from the employers. Perhaps that's a great balance. Some people will say it's yin and yang. Well, I'm not sure that that's the right mix, and I think that the whole thing could be overhauled.
How would you go about overhauling it? Should the government be cleaning it up? Should they? How do you stop this conflict of interest? Is it a conflict of interest?
Well, certainly the unions benefit from this because in much the same way as if you or I was called in for jury duty while still collecting a full-time wage, the money that we got from the government for sitting on the jury would go to our employer. Well, the unions do something quite similar with these industry super funds. They take all of the director fees, and there have been calculations that by the end of this decade, that'll be a flow, or the bulk of a flow of income of more than $30 million a year into the unions from these industry super funds in the form of director fees. I'm not sure that that's a great look. I don't think, if it's going to be changed, it's only going to be changed by this government. It's certainly not going to be changed by Albo if he becomes PM, because some people certainly arguing now that Labor has become the party of organised super. Certainly there's a very close tie. Industry super make big political donations. They will help Anthony Albanese when we come to the next election, and perhaps he's going to help them between now and then.
John, are the average worker out there, you know, working at whatever, checkout girl or whatever, are people aware of the amount of money that is coming out of their pocket and going ultimately into the pockets of retired politicians sitting on these boards? Do people really understand that the money goes out of their account and that this is how it's being used? Is it just basically it would appear, to feather the nest, if you like, of retired politicians in many ways?
The average Australian is totally disengaged with their super, which is really a shame, because this major review that I mentioned earlier on, what it found was that if we just did a better job of making use of that money, not just in the accumulation phase, so for example making sure that it's in an appropriate type of setting for how old we are. If you're younger, more of a growth setting. If you're approaching retirement, something more conservative. But once you retire, if you use that money efficiently, then you don't need to put so much in there on the way through. So overall, all of us could have more money going in as wages and having an improved working life income and obviously standard of living. But instead, because we're so disengaged and because we end up passing on average, 90% of what we take into retirement as an inheritance, well, it all just kind of gets wasted, and the next generation, they get to use it, and that isn't always used that well. If we used it more efficiently, we wouldn't have to put so much away. We all need to be a bit more engaged in our super. It is nearly 1/10 of all of everything that you earn, and it doesn't take that much just to make sure that you're not getting diddled on fees. You shouldn't be paying more than 1% in fees, and it's in an appropriate setting. I reckon you could do all that in about 2 hours' work, and it certainly would pay you off.
And then there would be all those ex-Labor politicians with nothing to do. It's a great work there, John. Keep up. We love reading you in the Daily Telegraph. John Rolfe, thanks so much for keeping a spotlight shined on these big super companies and funds. It's worth doing. Thanks, mate.
Good on you, Rowan.